everyone, it's Angela with Broadhead Memorial Public Library, back with another episode of Have You Heard? We continue to read Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim by Robert C. O'Brien with illustrations by Zena Bernstein. Quick thank you to Athenaeum Books for Young Readers for allowing us to share this story with you. And if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to like the video, and you can also subscribe to our channel and you'll get alerts when we post new videos. So let's see, where did we leave off yesterday? I remember they had left their winter house. They were looking for a new home, and we learned about the toy tinker. So let's read more and find out what that is all about. All right, the next chapter is called Thorn Valley. It might almost be easier to tell what wasn't in it, Nicodemus continued. That truck was as roomy as a small bus, and the old man hadn't wasted a square foot of it. Not that it was cluttered. On the contrary, everything was neatly in place on its shelves, or hook, or in its cabinet. It took us a while to understand what a treasure we had found. The truck contained, as you might expect, a big stock of toys. It also contained the old man's simple living quarters, a cot, a lamp, a work table, a folding chair, a bucket for carrying water, a plate, pots, pans, and so on. There was a tiny refrigerator with food in it, and some canned stuff, peas, beans, peaches, things like that. Most of the toys, we thought at first, we had no particular use for. There were toy automobiles and trucks, windmills and merry-go-rounds, airplanes, boats, and lots of others, mostly run on batteries. It was entertaining to look at them, and some of them we even tried out. For a while, the floor looked like Christmas morning. We tired of that and explored farther into the truck. Up near the front, we found several large cardboard boxes, and when we opened them, we found that they were full of electric motors of assorted sizes, replacement engines for broken or worn-out toys. There were dozens of them, ranging from very small, no bigger than a spool of thread, up to some so heavy we could hardly move them. Then, next to these, we found the real treasure, the old man's tools. They were neatly arranged in shining rows inside a steel cabinet as big as a trunk. There were screwdrivers, saws, hammers, clamps, vices, wrenches, and pliers. There were welding tools, soldering irons, and electric drills, and the beauty of it was, since they were designed for working on toys, they were nearly all miniature, easily small enough for us to handle. Yet they were themselves not toys. They were made of the finest tempered steel, like the tools of a watchmaker or a dentist. It was Arthur who said it first. "Do you realize what we've got here? We could open our own machine shop. With these tools and all these motors, we could make anything we wanted." "We could," said Jenner, "except you've forgotten one thing." "What's that?" "We have no electricity. The old man couldn't have run these tools off of batteries. The small toy motors, yes, but not the real ones, not the power tools. He had to plug into house current to use those. See, there's his extension cord on the wall." There was a long coil of heavy black cable hanging from a hook on the wall. It had a plug on one end and a socket on the other. Now another rat spoke up, a rat named Sullivan. He was a great friend of Arthur's, and like him, had a particular interest in engines and electricity. "Maybe," he said, "we could plug it into a house current too." "How?" I said. "Who'd let us?" "Do you remember that cave we looked at the other day? The one we decided was too close to the farmhouse?" "That was the beginning of it. The end you have seen yourself." He was speaking of the cave you saw today. We all trooped back to it and examined it more carefully. It was too close, or at least closer than we had planned to live to a human habitation. But when we saw the huge rose bush near the tractor shed, where with quite a lot of digging we could put a concealed entrance, But most important, we noticed that there was an electric light in the tractor shed. Mr. Fitzgibbon had an underground power cable leading out from his house to the shed. We dug a tunnel to it, tapped it, and we had all the electricity we needed. Near it ran a water pipe. We tapped that too, and we had running water. Then, a few at a time, we moved the tools and the motors from the toy tinker's truck to the cave. We got nearly all of them before the truck disappeared. We went back one day and it was gone. Only the hole remained, where its tires had been sunk. The forest rangers must have found it and hauled it away, but they never discovered or disturbed the mound where the old man lay buried. So we built ourselves the life you see around us. Our colony thrived and grew to 115. We taught our children to read and write. We had plenty to eat, running water, electricity, a fan to draw in fresh air, an elevator, and a refrigerator. Deep underground, our home stayed warm in the winter and cool in the summer. It was a comfortable, almost luxurious existence. And yet all was not well. After the first burst of energy, the moving in of the machines, the digging of tunnels and rooms, after that was done, a feeling of discontent settled upon us like some creeping disease. We were reluctant at first to admit it. We tried to ignore the feeling or to fight it off by building more things, bigger rooms, fancier furniture, carpeted hallways, things we didn't really need. I was reminded of a story I had read at the Boniface estate when I was looking for things written about rats. It was about a woman in a small town who bought a vacuum cleaner. Her name was Mrs. Jones, and up until then, she, like all of her neighbors, had kept her house spotlessly clean by using a broom and a mop. But the vacuum cleaner did it faster and better. And soon Mrs. Jones was the envy of all the other housewives in town, so they bought vacuum cleaners too. The vacuum cleaner business was so brisk, in fact, that the company that made them opened a branch factory in town. The factory used a lot of electricity, of course, and so did the women with their vacuum cleaners, so the local power company had to put up a new big plant to keep them all running. In its furnaces, the power plant burned coal, and out of its chimneys black smoke poured day and night, blanketing the town with soot and making all the floors dirtier than ever. Still, by working twice as hard and twice as long, the women of the town were able to keep their floors almost as clean as they had before Mrs. Jones ever bought a vacuum cleaner in the first place. The story was part of a book of essays, and the reason I had read it so eagerly was that it was called The Rat Race, which I learned means a race where, no matter how fast you run, you don't get anywhere. But there was nothing in the book about rats, and I felt bad about the title because I thought it wasn't a rat race at all. It was a people race. No sensible rats would ever do anything so foolish. And yet, here we were, rats getting caught up in something a lot like the people race, and for no good reason. And the worst thing was that even with our make-work projects, we didn't really have enough to do. Our life was too easy. I thought of what the scientists had written about our prairie dog ancestors, and I was worried. So were many of the others. We called a meeting, indeed a whole series of meetings, extending over more than a year. We talked and argued and considered, and we remembered our evenings in the library at the Boniface estate when we had wondered what a rat civilization would look like. Oddly enough, Jenner, my old and best friend, took little part in these discussions. He remained rather glumly silent and seemed disinterested. But most of the others felt as I did, and slowly some things became clear. We saw our problems and we figured them out as well as we could, and what to do about them. First, we realized that finding the toy tinker's truck, which had seemed like such an enormous stroke of luck, had in fact led us into the very trap we should have avoided. As a result, we were now stealing more than ever before, not only food, but electricity and water. Even the air we breathed was drawn in by a stolen fan, run by stolen current. It was this, of course, that made our life so easy that it seemed pointless. We did not have enough work to do because a thief's life is always based on somebody else's work. Second, There was always the fear in the back of all of our minds that we might get caught, or perhaps not caught. We took precautions against that, so much as found out. Mr. Fitzgibbon was surely aware that some of his crops were being removed, and as our group grew larger, we would have to take more and more. Already he had begun lining some of his grain bins with sheet metal. That didn't bother us particularly, because we knew how to get the doors open, but suppose he should take to locking them? We could cut through the locks, of course, or even through the sheet metal walls. We have the tools for that. But it would be a dead giveaway. What would Mr. Fitzgibbon think about rats who could cut through metal? All these things we worried about and talked about and puzzled over, but we could not find any easy answer, because there was none. There was, however, a hard answer. I began taking long walks into the forest. I had an idea in the back of my head. Sometimes I went alone, and sometimes with some of the others. On one particular day I went with Jenner. I had not yet told him about my idea, nor did I on the morning we set out, but merely proposed a direction. We took along enough food for lunch. I remember that it was autumn, a bright, cool day. The leaves made a rustling sound when the wind blew, and some of them were turning yellow. In my walks, I had been exploring the jeep trails, trying to figure out where they went and where they didn't go, trying to find the wildest parts of the forest, places where not even the rangers ever went. A few times I tried asking for information. I asked 2 squirrels, for instance, if they knew what lay on the other side of a mountain that rose before me. But they were silly, fearful creatures, and after looking at me in surprise, they both scurried up an oak tree and scolded senselessly in loud voices, shaking their tails until I left. I asked some chipmunks, and they were more polite. They couldn't answer my question, never having been further than 100 yards from where they were born, but advised me to ask the birds, more specifically one bird, a very old owl who was famous throughout the forest. They even told me how to find the enormous tree that he lived in. And that was the beginning of my acquaintance with the owl. He knew every tree, every trail, every stone in the forest. He was, as you know, not naturally friendly towards rats, or mice either, but when I told him about our life at NIHM and our escape, he grew interested. Though he did not say so, I think he had already been watching some of our activities from the air in the evenings. Anyway, he was curious and listened carefully when I told him about our problems and my ideas for solving them. I have talked to him many times since. It was he who told me about Thorn Valley. The valley lies deep in the forest beyond the big tree. The jeep trails do not cross it, nor even go close to it, for the mountains around it are forbidding, too steep and rocky even for jeeps, and are covered with thorny thickets. The owl told me that in all the years he had been flying, he had never seen a human being near it. Yet the bottom of the valley is level and broad and nearly a mile long. Steep cliffs wall it in all around. There are 3 ponds or small lakes in it, and apparently these are fed by springs, for they never dry up. On clear days, the owl said, he sometimes saw small fish swimming in them. I thought, could rats weave fish nets or make fish hooks? It was this valley that I was looking for that day I set out with Jenner. I had careful directions from the owl, yet it took us half a day, moving briskly, to reach the base of the mountains. Then up, very steeply for more than an hour, not really difficult for us, since rats are better climbers than men. Also, we are shorter, so we had little trouble with the spiny underbrush. From the top of the high ridge, at last we looked down, and the valley lay before us. It was beautiful and still, a wild and lonely place. Through the green and yellow treetops below us, I could see the water of one of the ponds sparkling in the sun. I got the idea that our eyes, were the first to ever see it. Yet that was not true, for as we descended into the valley, a deer suddenly appeared in the trees ahead and went bounding off down the slope. There were wild animals there, and I wondered if they even suspected that outside these walls of mountains, there were cities and roads and people. Most of the valley floor was in the forest, great spreading oak and maple trees, but near one of the ponds I saw what I had hoped to find, a large natural clearing, a glade where only coarse grass and wild flowers grew, and some clumps of black raspberry bushes. This clearing was on the far side of the valley. Beyond it the mountain wall rose again, a steep slope with big outcroppings of stone granite ledges that thrust 6 or 10 feet out of the earth. "We could live here," I said to Jenner. "I suppose we could," he said. "It's a beautiful place, but it's a long way from the barn. Think how far we'd have to carry food, and no electricity." "We could grow our own food," I said. I started to add, but didn't, and maybe someday make our own electricity if we decided to, and if we decided we wanted to. "We don't know how. Anyway, where would we grow it?" "Right here. It would be easy to clear away these weeds and bushes, and if we dug into the mountainside under those rock ledges, we'd have all the cave space we wanted, dry and warm, with a good roof. There could be room enough for thousands of us." "There aren't 1,000 of us." "There might be, someday." "But why? Why move? We got a better place to live right now. We've got all the food we want. We've got electricity and lights and running water. I can't understand why everybody talks about changing things." "Because everything we have is stolen." "That's silly. Is it stealing when farmers take milk from the cows or eggs from the chickens? They're just smarter than the cows and chickens, that's all." "Well, people are our cows. If we're smart enough, why shouldn't we get food from them?" "It's not the same. Farmers feed the cows and chickens and take care of them. We don't do anything for what we take. Besides, if we keep it up, we're sure to be found out." "What then? What if we are? People have been trying to exterminate rats for centuries, but they haven't succeeded, and we're smarter than the others. What are they going to do? Dynamite us? Let them try. We'll find out where they keep the dynamite and use it on them. Then we'd really be found out. Don't you see, Jenner? If we ever did anything like that, they'd figure out who we are and what we know. Then only 2 things could happen. Either they'd hunt us all down and kill us, or they'd capture us and put us in a sideshow, or maybe take us back to NIHM. And this time, we'd never get away." "I don't believe any of that," Jenner said. "You've got this idea stuck in your head. We've got to start from nothing and work hard and build a rat civilization. I say, why? Why start from nothing if you can start with everything? We've already got a civilization." "No, we haven't. We're just living on the edge of someone else's, like fleas on a dog's back. If the dog drowns, the fleas drown too." That was the beginning of an argument that never had a satisfactory ending. Jenner would not yield to my point of view, nor I his. It wasn't that he was lazy and didn't want to work. He was just more cynical than the rest of us. Stealing did not bother him. And he was a pessimist. He never believed that we could really make it on our own. Maybe he was right, but I, and most of the others, felt that we must at least try. If we fail, well, then I suppose we must come back here or find some other farm, or eventually forget all we learned and go back to stealing garbage. So we began to work out the plan. It had been a long time coming. 3 years ago this spring, we started watching Mr. Fitzgibbon to learn what he did and how he did it, to bring food out of the earth. We collected books and magazines on farming. We discovered early that in order to stop stealing, we would, for a while, have to steal more than ever. We've laid up a 2-year supply of food so that even if we don't succeed in growing a good crop the first year, we won't go hungry. We've got 2/3 of it moved to Thorn Valley already, and we've dug a dry cave to store it in, under one of the big rocks. We've got seeds. We have our plows. We've cleared and cultivated part of the land near the pond, and in a few days we'll begin our first planting. We've even dug some irrigation ditches in case there's a drought. We have a schedule worked out, sort of a countdown, and by early June we will be out of this cave. and out of Mr. Fitzgibbon's barn, I hope forever. All right. Well, I think we will stop there for today. If you are participating in our summer reading program, you can go ahead and write down 20 minutes of listening time for today, and we will be back tomorrow with more of Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIM. All right, have a fantastic day.